They met in 7th grade, two quiet girls in the back of an Ohio classroom. One shy, one sharp-tongued, both invisible to the rest of the world. Skylar Neese and Rachel Schoaf bonded over music and inside jokes. Two kids who didn't quite fit anywhere else. When a new girl, Sheila Eddy, transferred in, everything changed. She was confident, magnetic, the kind of teenager who could pull attention just by walking into a room. She took them both under her wing, and soon the trio became inseparable. They called themselves the Three Musketeers. Their social media was full of pictures together, arms linked, filters glowing, endless posts about friendship and loyalty. But underneath the hashtags and hearts, something darker brewed. Friends noticed that when Sheila was around, Skylar faded into the background. Rachel followed Sheila's lead on everything. What started as a friendship became a hierarchy, and Skylar was at the bottom. By the summer of 2012, things had shifted. Skylar had grown distant. She'd started keeping a journal, one that would later reveal how toxic things had become. She wrote about feeling excluded, mocked, cornered by the two girls she trusted most. There were arguments, not the small, forgettable kind, but cruel exchanges that left bruises that didn't fade. Still, she believed they'd work it out. She always believed that. On the night of July 6th, Skylar's parents kissed her goodnight. She was grounded for missing curfew a week earlier, but that didn't stop her from quietly slipping out her bedroom window after midnight. Security footage from her apartment complex later showed her running across the parking lot, laughing as she got into a car. Inside were Rachel and Sheila. It was supposed to be just another late-night joyride, a secret adventure like the ones they used to have before everything fell apart. But that night was different. They drove toward the Pennsylvania border, to a quiet stretch of road surrounded by woods, a spot they'd used before for smoking and gossiping away from adults. Skylar thought it was one of those nights. She didn't notice the shovel and knives in the trunk. When they reached the clearing, they laughed, took photos, and smoked. It was almost normal. But then Sheila nodded at Rachel. That was the signal. Rachel hesitated. She didn't want to. But Sheila whispered, "Now." They counted. 1, 2, 3. And as Skylar turned to light another cigarette, they lunged. Skylar screamed. She didn't understand. "Why?" she shouted. "Why are you doing this?" They didn't answer. They kept stabbing. When it was over, Skylar lay on the ground, her last words a broken plea for them to stop. The girls dragged her body into the trees and tried to dig a shallow grave, but the ground was too hard. So they covered her with branches and rocks, wiping their hands with paper towels before driving home in silence. They showered, changed clothes, and slept like nothing happened. The next morning, Skylar's parents woke up to an empty room. Her bed was untouched. Her window screen was pushed out. They thought she'd snuck out to see friends and would be back by breakfast. But when hours turned into days, they knew something was wrong. Her father called every friend he could think of, including Sheila and Rachel. Both said the same thing. We dropped her off near her house around midnight. She said she didn't want her parents to see her car. It was a lie they'd rehearsed. Weeks passed. Skylar's disappearance became a statewide search. Her parents plastered her face on every pole and window, begged for tips on TV, refused to give up. Sheila posted supportive tweets. "Skylar, please come home. I miss you so much." Rachel cried in interviews, telling reporters how scared she was for her best friend. For 6 months, the case went nowhere. Then Rachel broke. In January 2013, she had a breakdown in her family's living room. She screamed and sobbed until her mother called the police. When detectives arrived, Rachel whispered through tears, "We stabbed her." She led them to the site, a remote patch of woods near the Pennsylvania line. Beneath snow and soil, police found Skylar's remains. Forensic testing confirmed what her parents already feared. When investigators brought Sheila in, she smiled coldly. "We just didn't like her anymore," she said. Those 6 words became one of the most chilling confessions in modern true crime history. The public couldn't comprehend it. These weren't hardened criminals. They were honor students, cheerleaders, smiling girls with bright futures. The motive was so senseless it became haunting. Jealousy, control, the toxic hunger for validation? Maybe all of it, but mostly it was cruelty without reason. During sentencing, Skylar's father faced them from the gallery. His voice cracked as he said, "You took away the most important thing in my life for nothing. For absolutely nothing." Sheila stared at the floor. Rachel wept uncontrollably. Rachel Schoaf was sentenced to 30 years in prison, eligible for parole after 10. Shelia Eddy received life without parole. Neither family ever spoke again. Skylar's parents pushed for changes in the law after the trial, specifically to make it easier for police to issue immediate alerts for missing teenagers who aren't believed to be runaways. That law, known as Skylar's Law, now stands as her legacy in West Virginia. In the years since, her father still visits the stretch of woods where his daughter's life ended. He doesn't say her name out loud anymore. He doesn't have to. The wind carries it, Skylar. When people ask how something so evil could come from something that once looked like love, he just says, evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows right next to you. And sometimes it smiles when you call it your best friend. They met in the hallway of their high school, both 15, both outsiders in their own ways. Adrianne Reynolds was the new girl, bright, eager, desperate to fit in. Sarah Kolb was the opposite, confident, magnetic, and a little dangerous. She ruled their small circle of friends like a queen bee with a temper, and for reasons no one really understood, she took Adrianne under her wing. To Adrianne, it felt like belonging. To Sarah, it felt like control. Their friendship burned fast. Instant connection, shared secrets, hours of calls and texts. Adrianne started dressing like Sarah, talking like her, even hanging around Sarah's boyfriend, Corey. That's where things began to crack. Sarah didn't like to share, not her friends, not her image, and definitely not her boyfriend. But Corey was friendly and Adrianne was charming. It was harmless at first, until rumors started spreading through the hallways that Corey liked Adrianne better. Sarah's jealousy was immediate, violent. She started humiliating Adrianne publicly, calling her names in front of classmates, freezing her out of their group. Adrianne, hurt and confused, tried to apologize, tried to fix it, but Sarah's pride was already wounded. What had once been friendship turned into quiet hatred. On the morning of January 21st, 2005, Sarah texted Adrianne asking her to come hang out with her and Corey after school. She said she wanted to make peace. Adrianne, hopeful that maybe the fight was finally over, agreed. After lunch, she told a classmate she was excited. Sarah wants to talk. I think we're going to be friends again. Those were her last words anyone would hear. After school, Adrianne got into Sarah's car. They drove to a Taco Bell parking lot, a place they always used to meet. Inside the car, they talked. It seemed calm at first, witnesses later said. Then voices rose. Corey sat in the back seat watching as Sarah and Adrianne's argument spiraled. Suddenly, Sarah lunged, grabbing Adrianne's hair, punching, screaming. Adrianne tried to fight back, but Sarah was stronger. When the struggle ended, Sarah shouted to Corey, "Help me finish this." The next moments were chaos. Corey panicked, tried to pull Sarah off, but she wouldn't stop. The violence escalated until Adrianne stopped moving. The car went silent except for Sarah's breathing. She looked down, then said in a flat voice, "She's dead." They didn't call for help. They didn't take her to a hospital. Instead, Sarah told Corey they needed to get rid of her. They drove out to a rural area near Black Hawk State Park, a place Corey knew from hunting trips. There they dragged Adrianne's body out of the car, placed her on the ground, and poured gasoline over her. Corey hesitated. Sarah didn't. She lit the match. When the fire didn't fully burn the remains, they went back the next day with another friend, 17-year-old Nate, and used a saw to dismember what was left. They hid the remains in garbage bags and dumped them in a manhole. For 2 weeks, Adrianne's family searched, posting flyers, begging for leads. Sarah played the grieving friend perfectly, posting on MySpace about how much she missed Adrianne, even attending a candlelight vigil. She hugged Adrianne's mother, whispered that she hoped the police found whoever did this. But as investigators combed through phone records and surveillance footage, Sarah's lies began to crumble. The last person seen with Adrianne was her. Witnesses saw them together at Taco Bell. Sarah's story about dropping her off after lunch didn't match the timeline. And when police questioned Corey, he cracked. The confession spilled out in fragments. The fight, the fire, the cover-up. Corey led investigators to the scene, and what they found was almost too horrific to describe. Scattered remains, burned soil, melted jewelry, the remnants of a teenage girl's life extinguished by someone she called a friend. When Sarah was arrested, she showed no emotion. In interrogation videos, she smirked, rolled her eyes, asked if she could smoke a cigarette. She said it wasn't murder. It was just a fight that went too far. But her phone told a different story. Investigators found texts she'd sent to friends days before the killing. "I'm gonna kill that little slut. Watch me." In court, prosecutors painted Sarah as a manipulative sociopath, a girl who believed she could get away with anything. The defense tried to argue it was an accident, a tragic moment of teenage rage. But the evidence, the premeditation, the cover-up, the fire, left no doubt. Corey Gregory was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison. Sarah Kolb, just 16 at the time of the killing, was sentenced to 53 years. During sentencing, she showed no tears, no remorse. When the judge read her sentence, she stared straight ahead and said nothing. For Adrianne's parents, the loss was unimaginable. Their daughter had been killed not by a stranger, but by someone she trusted, someone who had sat at their dinner table, smiled at their family photos. In interviews, her father said, "I still can't understand it. They were just kids. How do kids get that evil?" Years later, Sarah filed appeals, claiming her sentence was too harsh. Every attempt was denied. She remains in prison, occasionally writing to former classmates, trying to convince them she's changed. But those who knew her back then remember her chilling calm the day after Adrianne vanished. Adrianne would have turned 33 this year. Her parents still keep her room the same. Bed made, photos on the dresser, posters on the wall. Time hasn't erased the ache, but it has turned the story into a warning told in classrooms and true crime documentaries that evil doesn't always arrive with age. Sometimes it wears eyeliner and a smile and sits next to you in class. And in the ashes of that burned field, where the police once knelt to collect what was left of her, there's now a small wooden cross. On it, in carved letters weathered by rain and wind, are 3 words that feel almost too painful to read. Her friend did. They were the kind of friends who knew everything about each other. They shared secrets, late-night texts, dreams about leaving their small town and becoming someone. Skylar Neese, 16, and her 2 best friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf, were inseparable. They posted photos of themselves smiling, wrapped in each other's arms, calling themselves the 3 Musketeers. To anyone looking in from the outside, they were just normal teenage girls. But behind their perfect selfies was a friendship cracking quietly under jealousy, lies, and growing resentment. It started small. Skylar was the honest one, the one who called things as she saw them. Sheila liked control. She liked to be the center of attention. Rachel was easily swayed, always following whoever was louder. When Skylar started pulling away, tired of the drama and cruelty that followed Sheila, the tension built. Skylar tweeted things like, "Sick of fake friends," and "You think you know someone." They were teenage words, but underneath them was fear. On July 6, 2012, Skylar's parents said goodnight, assuming their daughter would be safe in her bed. But around midnight, Skylar quietly slid her bedroom window open, stepped outside, and ran toward a familiar car waiting at the edge of the parking lot. She had no idea it would be her last night alive. In the car sat Sheila and Rachel. They'd told her they wanted to hang out, smoke, maybe drive around like they used to. Skylar hesitated at first, but eventually climbed in. As they drove out of town toward a wooded area in Pennsylvania, the girls laughed, joked, sang along to the radio. Skylar didn't notice that in the back seat was a shovel, cleaning supplies, and kitchen knives wrapped in cloth. When they reached the quiet clearing, a place they'd gone before to hang out, Skylar stepped out of the car, breathing in the humid night air. The stars were bright, the woods still. She turned to her friends, expecting conversation. But behind her, Sheila nodded at Rachel. That was the moment everything changed. On a silent count of 3, they attacked. Skylar tried to run, screaming for help, but the sound of knives and the dull thud of footsteps echoed louder. She fought, clawed, begged, asking why. The only word she had left. The answer came from Sheila's mouth, flat and cold. "We just didn't like you anymore." They stabbed her more than 50 times, leaving her body in the dirt. When she stopped moving, they dragged her to the edge of the woods, covered her with branches and stones, and left her there beneath the dark trees. They climbed back into the car, turned the music up, and drove home like nothing had happened. The next morning, Skylar's parents found her window open and her bed empty. They called her phone again and again, but it went straight to voicemail. The police initially treated it as a runaway case. After all, there was no sign of forced entry, and her purse was missing. But Skylar wasn't the type to disappear. Her father, Dave Neese, began driving the streets every night, hanging posters, begging anyone to talk. Meanwhile, Sheila and Rachel acted devastated. They tweeted about missing Skylar, attended vigils, hugged her parents. Sheila even helped Dave search. Her social media posts painted her as the grieving best friend. "Skylar, come home," she wrote. "I miss you." But as weeks turned into months, suspicion began to grow. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage and found a single clue. Around midnight, Skylar was seen getting into a silver sedan. The car matched Sheila's. When questioned, Sheila claimed she had dropped Skylar off near her house after hanging out. But when investigators checked phone records, her story didn't line up. Both girls' phones pinged in rural Pennsylvania, near the border, nowhere near Skylar's home. By December, cracks appeared in Rachel's composure. Her guilt was eating her alive. On New Year's Eve, she broke down, shaking and crying, and confessed to her mother that she and Sheila had killed Skylar. Her mother drove her straight to the police station, where Rachel told detectives everything: the plan, the knives, the words Sheila said. The reason: we just didn't like her anymore. It was senseless, monstrous. Investigators followed Rachel to the wooded area where she and Sheila had left Skylar's body. There, under piles of branches and soil, they found her remains, nearly 6 months after she vanished. The discovery shattered the town. Skylar's parents collapsed when they were told. The community that had searched for her, prayed for her, couldn't comprehend it. 2 teenage girls, smiling in yearbook photos, had murdered their best friend for no reason. Rachel immediately pled guilty to second-degree murder. She broke down in court sobbing, saying she didn't know why she did it. Sheila, on the other hand, showed no remorse. She smiled in court, whispered to reporters, posted tweets like, "We really did go on 3." Even after her arrest, she seemed proud of what she'd done. In 2014, Sheila Eddy was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Rachel Schoaf received 30 years with the possibility of parole after 10. The judge called it one of the most tragic, senseless crimes I have ever seen. Skylar's parents fought to change the laws after her death, pushing for Skylar's Law, which made it mandatory for police to issue immediate Amber Alerts for any missing child, even if there's no evidence of abduction. Her father said, "At least now no other kid will be ignored the way she was." Years later, the story of Skylar, Sheila, and Rachel still haunts anyone who reads it. 3 girls who once promised they'd be friends forever ended in betrayal, blood, and silence. In one of her final tweets before that night, Skylar wrote, "You may think you know someone, but you really don't." And in the end, those words became her own epitaph, a warning to every parent, every friend, and every young person who believes loyalty and love are always the same thing. They called them the perfect trio. 3 teenagers from Florida, charismatic, athletic, full of life, who spent nearly every waking hour together. Their names were Seth Jackson, Amber Wright, and Michael Bargo. They laughed together, partied together, shared secrets. But what started as a young love triangle spiraled into something so grotesque and planned that investigators later called it one of the most brutal teenage murders in Florida history. Seth was 16, popular and loud, the kind of kid who filled every room he entered. Amber, his on and off girlfriend, was 15. Beautiful, fiery, manipulative in ways people only began to understand later. When she broke up with Seth and started dating another boy, Michael Bargo, things turned ugly fast. Michael, 18, was possessive, jealous, and filled with rage. He hated Seth. To him, Seth wasn't just an ex, he was competition. And in Michael's mind, that was unforgivable. The feud began on Facebook. Teen insults became public warfare. Amber posted mocking comments. Seth fired back with his own. They dragged each other through social media, trading threats and humiliation. But behind the screens, something darker was forming. Michael wasn't content with words. He told Amber and their friends, Kyle Hooper, Charlie Ely, and Justin Soto, that he wanted to get rid of Seth for good. At first, everyone thought he was joking. But as days passed, his words got colder, more specific. He began outlining a plan. It wasn't impulsive. It was organized, premeditated, evil. And what's worse, Amber agreed to help. On April 17, 2011, Amber texted Seth. She told him she wanted to see him, to talk, to make up. She told him she missed him, that she wanted to be friends again. Seth hesitated. He'd told friends he didn't trust her. But teenage emotions are powerful. Love, anger, and hope can blur even the clearest warnings. So when Amber said she'd be at a friend's house and she wanted him to come over, Seith agreed. That friend's house belonged to Charlie Ely. It sat isolated, surrounded by trees and dirt roads. No neighbors nearby. Inside that small, dim house, Michael and the others waited, guns ready, baseball bats in hand. They turned off the lights and waited in silence. When Seith stepped inside, he didn't even have time to realize what was happening. A gunshot exploded in the dark. He fell screaming, clutching his arm. He begged for help, calling out Amber's name. She didn't answer. Michael emerged from the shadows and kept firing. Seith tried to crawl away, his body shaking. He pleaded for them to stop. But to them, this wasn't a fight anymore. It was an execution. When the gun jammed, they beat him. The noise was sickening, the sound of wood hitting bone. Seith was still alive when Michael ordered the others to drag him into the bathroom. There, Michael fired again. This time the bullet hit his face. But even that wasn't enough for them. Michael demanded they dispose of the body. He didn't want anyone to find out. They stuffed Seith's body into a sleeping bag, dragged it outside, and burned it in a backyard fire pit until nothing recognizable remained. When it was done, they scooped up the ashes, bones, and fragments and dumped them into a nearby quarry, watching as the water swallowed what was left of their friend. Afterward, they went to McDonald's. They ate. They laughed. They posted online like nothing had happened. By the next morning, Seith's mother reported him missing. She told police he never came home after seeing Amber. Investigators tracked his phone and pieced together his last messages, and Amber's name was in nearly every one of them. It didn't take long for detectives to find Charlie Ely's house, and what they found there was horrifying. Burnt remains, bloodstains, a bullet hole in the wall. When police questioned Amber, she cracked almost immediately. She told them everything, every text, every plan, every moment leading up to the murder. She said Michael was the mastermind, that he told her to lure Seith there, that he was the one who pulled the trigger. Michael didn't deny it. In fact, he bragged about it. He told officers, "I wanted him dead. I'm proud of it." The trial drew national attention. The details were almost too gruesome to believe, that teenagers could plan something so calculated, so heartless, against one of their own friends. Amber Wright, 15 at the time, was tried as an adult and sentenced to life in prison. Kyle Hooper and Justin Soto received the same. Charlie Ely, who owned the house, was sentenced to 10 years for her role, later reduced. And Michael Bargo, the ringleader, the boy who turned jealousy into murder, was sentenced to death. The courtroom was silent as his sentence was read. He didn't cry. He didn't even flinch. Seith's family, sitting only a few feet away, wept quietly. When investigators were later asked what drove them, their answer was simple: ego and manipulation. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about hate. It was about control, the need to dominate, to destroy someone who dared to walk away. Years later, in interviews, Seith's mother said she still checks her son's Facebook page sometimes. She said it helps her remember him before the anger, before the betrayal, before that night when friendship became a trap. The ashes of what happened in that small Florida town still linger, not just in the ground where they burned him, but in every parent's heart who wonders what kind of darkness can grow inside teenagers who once called someone their best friend. They were supposed to be inseparable. 3 bright-eyed high school friends who spent summers together by the water, shared playlists, and talked about their dreams long into the night. But in 2014, what began as a friendship between 2 teenage girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, would turn into one of the most disturbing cases in modern crime. A story that blurred the line between fantasy, obsession, and pure evil. Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier were both 12 years old. They weren't the popular girls, not the ones everyone invited to parties. They lived in their own quiet world of imagination, a world where internet myths and creepypasta stories felt more real than the people around them. And at the center of that world was a creature called Slender Man, a tall, faceless figure born on the internet, whispered about in forums, drawn in fan art, and believed by some to be watching from the shadows. To most kids, Slender Man was just a story, a digital ghost to scare each other with. But to Morgan and Anissa, he became something different, something sacred. They believed he was real, that he lived in a mansion in the woods, and that if they didn't do something to prove their loyalty, he would come for them and their families. Over weeks, the fantasy consumed them. The line between story and reality disappeared. Their plan formed in whispers, text messages, and sleepovers. They would prove themselves to Slender Man by sacrificing someone. They needed a victim. And in their twisted logic, they chose their best friend, Peyton Leutner, a quiet, kind girl who trusted them completely. Peyton, nicknamed Bella by Morgan, never saw it coming. On May 31st, 2014, the three girls went to a birthday sleepover at Morgan's house. The next morning, they told Peyton they wanted to go play in the woods near a park, a familiar place where they'd spent countless afternoons before. Peyton followed, smiling, unaware of what her friends had planned. As they walked deeper into the trees, the laughter faded. The path grew quieter. That's when Morgan and Anissa told her to lie down, to play a game of hide-and-seek. And when she did, Morgan pulled out a kitchen knife she'd taken from home. What happened next was unthinkable. The two girls held her down and stabbed her, 19 times. Peyton screamed, asking, "Why are you doing this?" Her friends didn't answer. Morgan kept stabbing until she stopped moving. When it was over, they stood over her, shaking. Peyton's white shirt was soaked in blood. Anissa told her to lie still, that she would lose less blood that way, and then they walked away, leaving her in the dirt, alone, believing she was dead. But Peyton wasn't. Despite being stabbed in her chest, arms, and legs, she managed to drag herself through the woods, bleeding and barely conscious, until she reached a bike path. A passing cyclist found her, called 911, and held her hand as she whispered, "My best friend did this." Back in the woods, Morgan and Anissa were walking toward the interstate. They were headed, they said, to Slender Man's mansion in the forest, a place they believed was real. When police found them hours later, they were calm, almost relieved. Morgan told detectives, "We had to do it. He watches us. If we didn't, he would have hurt our families." The interviews were chilling. Two 12-year-olds speaking in monotone voices, describing a murder attempt as if it were a mission. They said Slender Man wanted proof of their devotion. Morgan told detectives, "I didn't feel anything. It was like I was watching myself do it." Peyton survived after multiple surgeries. Doctors said one stab wound missed her heart by less than a millimeter. When she woke up in the hospital, her first words were, "Did they get them?" She would later say in interviews that she forgave them, but she would never forget. The trial became one of the most widely discussed juvenile cases in America. Experts debated whether two 12-year-old girls could truly understand what they'd done, or if they were victims of delusion. Morgan was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia. Anissa was found to have a shared psychotic disorder, a condition where one person adopts another's delusions. In 2017, both girls were found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Anissa was sentenced to 25 years in a mental health facility. Morgan received 40 years. Neither went to a traditional prison. Peyton, meanwhile, rebuilt her life. She returned to school, then college, and spoke publicly only once, in a calm, steady voice that carried both grace and pain. "They were my friends," she said, "and I trusted them. But now I know that trust is something you earn, not something you give away." The case remains one of the darkest examples of how imagination and obsession can twist young minds. It forced parents to look at the internet differently, to question what their children were reading, who they were talking to, and what they believed. And perhaps the most chilling part is that it wasn't about hate. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about belief. A belief so strong it erased the boundary between fiction and murder. Every year on the anniversary of that morning, the park in Waukesha stands quiet. The trees still whisper, the path still winds through the woods where three girls once walked together. But now those woods carry an invisible weight. The memory of friendship turned into fear, and the haunting truth that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we invent ourselves. It was the kind of friendship that seemed unbreakable. Two teenage girls who told each other everything, who stayed up until sunrise talking about their futures, who swore they'd always be sisters no matter what. But in 2015, in the quiet city of Indiana, that friendship between 16-year-old Serena McKay and her two classmates, Faith Fontaine and Serena's supposed best friend, Taylor Moffat, would end in one of the most horrific murders ever caught on camera. Serena was vibrant, loud, and full of energy. A girl who loved to laugh and never held grudges for long. Her friends described her as forgiving to a fault, someone who always believed people could change. Taylor, on the other hand, was quieter, more insecure. often feeling like she lived in Serena's shadow. The two had bonded over shared secrets and difficult home lives, but their friendship had started to fracture months before the tragedy. There were fights about boys, about jealousy, about betrayal. They argued constantly on social media, petty teenage insults that everyone assumed would blow over. But resentment runs deep when mixed with pride, humiliation, and a desire to prove control. For Taylor, it became an obsession. She couldn't stand being the one who was laughed at, the one who people compared to Serena. So one night she decided to end it, not the friendship, but Serena herself. On April 23, 2017, Serena was invited to a house party after school. The small house, tucked away near the outskirts of town, was filled with music, alcohol, and the haze of teenage rebellion. She didn't know that Taylor and another girl, Faith, were waiting for her with something far worse than an argument in mind. As the night went on, tensions rose. Someone made a comment, a drunken insult that reignited everything. Serena and Taylor started shouting. People filmed on their phones. What happened next wasn't just a fight. It was a beating that lasted for minutes while others watched. Taylor and Faith took turns punching, kicking, and dragging Serena by her hair. They hit her until she could barely move. All of it, every scream, every blow, was captured on a cell phone camera. No one called for help. No one stopped it. The next morning, Serena's body was found in a nearby field, battered and bloodied, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. The video spread across social media before police could even contain the scene. Millions saw it before it was taken down. The image of Serena begging for mercy, her supposed best friend's voice screaming in rage, haunted anyone who watched it. The community was shattered. People couldn't comprehend how something like that could happen, how a group of kids could record a murder and post it online like a trophy. The police quickly identified Taylor and Faith as the suspects. They didn't deny it. They didn't even seem to understand the weight of what they had done. During interrogation, Taylor said, "She made me look stupid." I just snapped. Faith claimed she was just following along, afraid of what Taylor would do to her if she didn't. But the video told the truth. Both of them took turns. Both of them laughed, and both of them made sure the world would see what they had done. The trial was fast. There was no mystery, no doubt. The footage was the evidence, and it spoke louder than any confession. The judge called it one of the most disturbing acts of cruelty I have ever seen. Taylor, 17, was sentenced as an adult to life in prison without parole. Faith, who was 15, received 10 years in a youth facility. Serena's family never recovered. Her mother said she couldn't sleep without seeing that video in her head, hearing her daughter's screams. Her father said he forgave the girls, but he would never forgive the ones who filmed and did nothing. The case became a chilling warning about the power of social media, how cruelty spreads faster than conscience. It forced schools and parents across the country to talk about empathy, peer pressure, and the dark thrill of digital fame. But for those who knew Serena, it wasn't about hashtags or court sentences. It was about a girl who trusted too easily, who believed friendship could survive anything, even jealousy. She was wrong. In the years since her death, her family has turned her memory into a campaign for kindness, visiting schools to talk about the real cost of bullying and betrayal. They say Serena's legacy isn't just tragedy. It's a reminder that when you see something wrong, you speak up. You don't record it. You don't walk away. Some nights, when the wind moves through the trees outside that small town, people say you can still hear faint echoes of laughter from the field. The same laughter that once meant friendship, now twisted into something far more haunting. Which of these cases shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. It was a friendship that everyone envied. Chloe Kennedy and her childhood friend, Madison Lytle, had been inseparable since kindergarten. Growing up in suburban Georgia, the two girls shared sleepovers, cheerleading practice, and secrets they promised they'd never tell. To the outside world, they were two perfect teenagers navigating the chaos of high school together. But behind closed doors, their bond was far from perfect. Chloe was quiet, studious, and polite, the kind of girl teachers described as thoughtful beyond her years. Madison was the opposite, loud, impulsive, and controlling. She liked being the center of attention and had a way of twisting friendships to suit her desires. Chloe, patient and forgiving, tolerated Madison's temper and manipulations for years, thinking that loyalty meant enduring everything. But when Chloe started dating a boy Madison liked, everything shifted. The tension built silently at first. Madison started sending passive-aggressive texts, spreading rumors about Chloe and subtly undermining her at school. Chloe tried to confront her, but Madison would laugh it off in front of friends, painting Chloe as overreacting. Their circle of friends began to fracture, with some taking Madison's side and others feeling uncomfortable watching the cruelty. By September 2016, the tension reached a breaking point. Madison began plotting, obsessed with the idea that Chloe had betrayed her. She recruited 2 other classmates, both 15, into her plan, friends who were easily influenced, eager to please, and willing to follow her lead. Together, they decided that Chloe had to be taught a lesson that would turn deadly. One Saturday evening, Madison lured Chloe out under the guise of hanging out at a local park. The 2 friends met, chatting and laughing at first as if nothing was wrong. But the laughter soon faded as the other 2 girls emerged from the shadows. Chloe was grabbed, her attempts to struggle ignored. Madison's plan was meticulous. She wanted Chloe frightened, helpless, and aware that her so-called friends had turned against her. The attack lasted longer than anyone could have imagined. Chloe was punched, shoved, and stabbed multiple times in a struggle that seemed almost ritualistic. Madison's voice rang out in cold instructions, directing the other 2 girls as if choreographing a performance. Chloe tried to call for help, screaming for anyone nearby, but the isolated park offered no refuge. Afterward, Madison and her accomplices left Chloe severely injured, barely clinging to consciousness, believing they had succeeded. But Chloe survived, crawling from the park and collapsing near a passing car. The driver called 911 immediately, and she was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Doctors said her survival was nothing short of miraculous. The investigation was swift. Police traced social media messages, texts, and eyewitness accounts. The complicity of the other 2 girls was evident, but Madison emerged as the mastermind, the one who manipulated, coerced, and directed the crime from start to finish. When the case went to trial, prosecutors painted a chilling portrait of adolescent cruelty, of a girl whose jealousy and obsession turned her against the person she had once called her best friend. Madison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while her 2 accomplices received long-term sentences in juvenile facilities. Chloe, after months of recovery, returned to school, her body healed but her trust forever shattered. She later spoke publicly about the betrayal and the importance of recognizing toxic relationships early. Her story became a cautionary tale, one that warned parents, educators, and teens about the devastating consequences when envy and obsession replace friendship. Even years later, the local community remembers the event as a moment that forever changed the way they viewed teenage dynamics. Chloe's parents created a support group for victims of youth violence, ensuring that no other teen would have to endure what Chloe had survived. The haunting lesson remains. Sometimes the person you trust most can become the greatest threat. The friends who promise loyalty can, in a moment, become the source of unimaginable danger, and the scars, both visible and invisible, linger long after the attack is over. It began in a quiet neighborhood in New Jersey, where 2 teenage girls, Emily Russo and Danielle Carter, had been best friends for as long as anyone could remember. They were inseparable, sharing clothes, secrets, and a love for thrillers and horror movies. To outsiders, their bond seemed unbreakable, a perfect teenage friendship. But beneath the surface, jealousy and resentment were quietly festering. Emily was outgoing, academically gifted, and had a natural charm that drew people in. Danielle was quieter, more introspective, and often felt overshadowed by Emily's brightness. At first, their differences seemed complementary. Danielle admired Emily's confidence, and Emily appreciated Danielle's loyalty. But as high school progressed, subtle cracks appeared. Danielle began to feel invisible in her own friendship, often sidelined when Emily made new friends or dated. By early 2016, Danielle's envy had taken root, twisting into something darker. She started harboring thoughts that Emily's dominance in their friendship should end. One day, after an argument over a boy they both liked, Danielle realized that Emily had humiliated her in front of their peers. In Danielle's mind, Emily had to be punished. The plan formed slowly, meticulously, fueled by Danielle's obsession. She convinced a close friend, 17-year-old Sarah Mitchell, to help. Together, they plotted what they called the perfect scare, something that would terrify Emily and prove that Danielle would no longer be disrespected. What started as a scare escalated into a deadly intent as Danielle's anger grew uncontrollable. On March 12, 2016, Emily was walking home from school when Danielle and Sarah approached her, pretending to want to hang out. Emily, unsuspecting, accepted. They led her to a secluded alley near the park, a place they had visited for late-night walks in the past. It was familiar, comforting, the perfect place to disarm her. Once there, Danielle struck first. Emily tried to defend herself, but Danielle was relentless. Sarah assisted, holding Emily down while Danielle stabbed her multiple times. Emily screamed for help, calling out Danielle's name in disbelief. Danielle whispered coldly, "This is what happens when you humiliate me." By the time passers-by discovered Emily's body, she was gravely injured. Paramedics arrived, but despite their efforts, she succumbed to her wounds. The community was shaken to its core. A murder motivated not by robbery or revenge, but by envy, jealousy, and a warped sense of justice. Police investigation was swift. Danielle and Sarah had left behind evidence, fingerprints, phone messages, and witnesses who saw them near the scene. Danielle initially denied involvement, claiming she had tried to stop Sarah from attacking Emily. But Sarah's confession revealed the truth. Danielle had orchestrated every step, and the attack had been deliberate. During the trial, prosecutors painted Danielle as a calculating teen, consumed by envy and the need for control. Her desire to dominate Emily's social standing had escalated into murder. Sarah received a lesser sentence for her role, as the court recognized she had been influenced by Danielle's manipulations. Danielle, despite her age, was tried as an adult and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Emily's family struggled to cope with the betrayal. Her parents spoke publicly about the dangers of toxic friendships and the subtle signs of escalating jealousy among teens. Friends and classmates mourned the loss of a vibrant girl whose life had been stolen by someone she once trusted implicitly. The community responded with grief, candlelight vigils, and increased awareness programs in schools. Educators emphasized the importance of recognizing early signs of manipulation and jealousy in friendships. Emily's story became a somber reminder. Trust, once broken by obsession and envy, can be deadly. Even years later, Danielle remains in prison, reflecting on a crime that she claimed was meant to teach a lesson. Emily's memory lives on through scholarships, anti-bullying campaigns, and a lingering question in the hearts of everyone who knew her. How well do we truly know those we call friends? It started as a friendship full of shared dreams and late-night secrets in a small town in Pennsylvania. Two teenage girls, Kayla Michaels and Brittany Rogers, had been best friends since middle school. They went to the same school, attended the same church, and spent countless hours together in each other's homes. Their bond seemed unshakable, until jealousy and obsession twisted their relationship into something deadly. Kayla was popular, outgoing, and academically driven. Brittany was quieter, shy, and often felt overshadowed by Kayla's charisma. Over time, Brittany began to feel that Kayla controlled their friendship, dictating where they went, who they spoke to, and even what they wore. Resentment grew in Brittany's mind, compounded by rumors Kayla had spread about her at school. By the fall of 2016, Brittany's jealousy had evolved into something dangerous. One day, Brittany confided in a classmate about her feelings of anger and betrayal. The classmate, wary but curious, didn't realize that Brittany was already planning something extreme. She decided that Kayla had to be removed from her life, permanently. To Brittany, the only way to regain control was to harm the friend who had, in her mind, humiliated her for years. On October 14, 2016, Kayla received a text from Brittany inviting her to hang out after school. Kayla, unsuspecting and trusting, agreed. They met at Brittany's house, a quiet suburban home with a backyard that backed onto a wooded area. At first, they chatted casually, reminiscing about old times. But as the conversation shifted, Brittany's anger surfaced. Suddenly, Brittany attacked. She struck Kayla repeatedly, dragging her into the backyard where she had hidden a kitchen knife. Kayla tried to fight back, screaming for help, but Brittany's strength and determination were overwhelming. When Kayla collapsed, Brittany stabbed her multiple times in a frenzied attack. Brittany then attempted to cover her tracks, dragging Kayla's body into the woods and trying to hide it under leaves and branches. But her efforts were clumsy and desperate. A neighbor walking their dog noticed the disturbance and called 911. Emergency responders arrived to find Kayla gravely injured but still alive. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors stabilized her after emergency surgery. The investigation revealed the premeditated nature of the attack. Text messages between Brittany and her classmate indicated she had planned the assault in advance. Witnesses confirmed she had been talking about hurting Kayla for days, motivated by jealousy and a desire for revenge. Brittany was arrested and confessed to the crime, claiming she just wanted Kayla to understand what it felt like to be powerless. During the trial, prosecutors described Brittany as a calculated and manipulative teenager, driven by obsession and a distorted sense of justice. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 12, while her classmate received a lesser sentence for failing to report the plot. Kayla's recovery was slow but steady. She returned to school months later, her body healed but her trust forever scarred. She and her family became advocates for recognizing signs of toxic friendships and the dangerous effects of unchecked jealousy among adolescents. The case left the small Pennsylvania town shaken. Parents, teachers, and students were forced to confront the dark reality that even the closest friends could harbor intentions of extreme harm. Kayla's story became a cautionary tale. Sometimes the people we trust most can turn into the very danger we never imagined. Years later, Kayla said in interviews that she forgave Brittany, but she would never forget. "Friendship isn't just about loyalty," she said. "It's about respect, and when respect is gone, everything else can turn deadly." It was a friendship that had been the envy of many. In the suburban town of Missouri, two teenage girls, Olivia Hartman and Sophia Lane, had been inseparable since elementary school. They shared lunches, sleepovers, and everything in between. To their peers, they were a perfect duo, always laughing, supporting each other, and seemingly untouchable. But beneath that picture-perfect exterior, tension simmered, fueled by envy, manipulation, and the dark side of adolescent obsession. Olivia was outgoing, confident, and had a natural charm that drew people in. Sophia, quieter and more reserved, often felt overshadowed by Olivia's personality. Over time, Sophia's feelings of inadequacy grew, compounded by small slights, teasing, and what she perceived as Olivia's betrayal in social situations. What began as normal teenage rivalry slowly transformed into resentment that consumed Sophia's thoughts. By early 2017, Sophia had convinced herself that Olivia was the source of all her misery. She began confiding in a close friend, Lacey Miller, describing her desire to teach Olivia a lesson, though the fantasy soon morphed into a deadly plan. Lacey, hesitant at first, became an accomplice, drawn in by Sophia's manipulative insistence that it was necessary to restore balance to their friendship. On May 21, 2017, Sophia invited Olivia to a local park under the guise of wanting to hang out, reminisce, and have a fun day together. Olivia, trusting and unsuspecting, agreed. The park was secluded with thick woods bordering the trails, perfect for what Sophia had planned. As they walked deeper into the wooded area, Sophia and Lacey cornered Olivia. What followed was sudden and brutal. Sophia attacked Olivia, hitting and restraining her while Lacey assisted. Olivia struggled and screamed for help, calling Sophia by name in disbelief, begging her to stop. Sophia stabbed Olivia multiple times with a knife she had hidden in her backpack. The sounds of struggle echoed through the trees, but no one was nearby to intervene. After the attack, the girls fled the scene, leaving Olivia critically injured but alive. A hiker passing through the area discovered her and called 911. Paramedics arrived quickly and Olivia was rushed to the hospital. Despite the severity of her wounds, she survived after extensive emergency surgery. The investigation revealed chilling premeditation. Text messages between Sophia and Lacey detailed the planning stages, including where and when to carry out the attack. The police concluded that Sophia was the mastermind, manipulating Lacey into helping her execute the assault. During the trial, prosecutors described Sophia's actions as calculated and cold-blooded. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 15, while Lacey received a reduced sentence for her secondary role. The case shocked the local community, illustrating how jealousy and obsession could escalate into violent acts among seemingly ordinary teenagers. Olivia, after a long recovery, returned to school, though the trauma left lasting scars on both her body and psyche. She and her family became vocal advocates for awareness of toxic friendships, warning other teens and parents about the hidden dangers of manipulation and obsessive behavior. Even years later, Olivia's story serves as a chilling reminder that the closest friends can sometimes become the most dangerous enemies. The trust and loyalty that bind friendships can, in an instant, be replaced with rage and violence, a lesson that leaves an indelible mark on everyone who hears it. In a quiet Kentucky suburb in 2015, two high school juniors, Hannah Myers and Lily Donovan, were best friends. They were the kind of friends who finished each other's sentences, wore matching bracelets, and spent every waking moment together. Their friendship was intense, emotional, and, as some classmates would later describe, too close to be healthy. Hannah was ambitious and assertive, with a bright smile and a strong personality that often drew admiration. Lily, on the other hand, was more introverted, loyal to a fault, and easily influenced. She idolized Hannah, doing whatever she could to stay in her good graces. But over time, Hannah's confidence morphed into dominance. She began controlling every aspect of Lily's life, who she spoke to, where she went, and how she dressed. What started as friendship slowly turned into emotional captivity. By late 2015, cracks appeared. Lily started to pull away, tired of living under Hannah's control. She began making new friends, joining clubs, and rebuilding her independence. Hannah didn't take it well. She saw Lily's newfound freedom as betrayal. Her texts became accusatory, her tone cold and manipulative. She would send late-night messages like, "If you leave me, you'll regret it." On November 3rd, Hannah's obsession reached its breaking point. She convinced herself that Lily had humiliated her by replacing her with new friends. Hannah began venting online, posting cryptic status updates about loyalty and revenge. That same night, she texted Lily saying she wanted to talk things out in person to fix their friendship before it was too late. Lily, still clinging to the hope that Hannah might return to her old self, agreed. They met at a quiet park near their school, the same spot where they had shared countless laughs as kids. At first, the conversation was calm, but within minutes, Hannah's mask slipped. She accused Lily of betrayal, screaming that she had ruined her life. Lily tried to leave, but Hannah blocked her path. What happened next was an explosion of suppressed anger. Hannah attacked Lily with a knife she had hidden in her hoodie pocket. The assault was frenzied, years of bottled emotions unleashed in moments. Lily's screams echoed through the park, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. She was found lifeless, lying beside the swings they used to play on. Police arrested Hannah the next morning at her home. During interrogation, she remained eerily calm, telling detectives that Lily made her do it, that she couldn't bear watching her best friend belong to someone else. The murder shocked the entire community, sparking national headlines about possessiveness, obsession, and toxic friendships among teenagers. At trial, prosecutors painted Hannah as a controlling and obsessive friend whose need for dominance had turned into homicidal rage. The defense attempted to argue mental instability, citing her history of depression and obsession. But the jury was unmoved. Hannah was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Lily's family was shattered. Her mother became an advocate for mental health awareness and teen relationship education, working with schools to help identify controlling or possessive behaviors among young people. Teachers and counselors across the district began incorporating new programs to help teens recognize emotional manipulation and obsession before it escalated to violence. Hannah's former classmates described her as someone they never truly knew, a girl whose outward charm masked deep insecurities and rage. In later interviews from prison, Hannah expressed remorse, saying, "I thought if I couldn't have her friendship, no one could." The story of Hannah and Lily became a haunting reminder that friendship, when twisted by control and obsession, can turn into something deadly. The line between love and possession blurred beyond recognition, leaving only tragedy in its wake. In the peaceful town of Madison, Wisconsin, 3 teenagers, Sarah Collins, Brooke Henson, and Natalie Reed, had been inseparable since middle school. They were known as the trio, always together, always smiling. Their friendship seemed unbreakable, the kind that everyone admired. But as the years passed and high school pressures grew, small fractures began to appear in their perfect circle. Sarah was the confident one, athletic, charismatic, and popular. Brooke was thoughtful and creative, often mediating between her two strong-willed friends. Natalie was quiet and insecure, living in the shadow of Sarah's dominance. Though she admired Sarah, resentment began to build as she grew tired of being treated like a sidekick. Sarah's jokes often came at Natalie's expense, and Brooke, unwilling to cause conflict, stayed silent. By senior year, tension had turned toxic. Sarah's behavior became crueler, constant teasing, belittling comments, and dismissive jabs disguised as humor. Natalie began withdrawing, her resentment turning into obsession. Brooke sensed something dark was brewing between them, but she never imagined how far it would go. On February 8, 2018, Sarah invited her two friends for a movie night at her house. It was supposed to be an attempt to mend the strained friendship. They ordered pizza, watched old comedies, and laughed about childhood memories. To anyone watching, it looked like three friends healing old wounds. But underneath the laughter, anger simmered. As the night wore on, Natalie's mood shifted. She accused Sarah of mocking her behind her back, of being a bully disguised as a best friend. Sarah rolled her eyes, brushing off the accusation. That dismissal, that moment of arrogance, became the spark. Natalie stood up, trembling with rage, shouting that she was done being the joke. What happened next was chaos. Natalie grabbed a heavy candle holder from the coffee table and struck Sarah across the head. The impact sent Sarah collapsing to the floor, blood pooling around her. Brooke screamed in shock, frozen in disbelief as Natalie continued her assault, screaming through tears. When it was over, the room was silent except for Brooke's sobbing. Brooke called 911 immediately, but Sarah was pronounced dead at the scene. Natalie sat in shock, muttering that she didn't mean for it to go that far. When police arrived, she surrendered without resistance. The investigation revealed a long history of emotional manipulation and bullying between the girls. Text messages recovered from Natalie's phone showed months of anger and resentment toward Sarah, alongside messages to Brooke describing her pain and humiliation. Prosecutors argued that Natalie's actions were fueled by years of psychological torment that finally exploded into violence. During the trial, Natalie's defense argued diminished capacity, claiming she had been emotionally abused and suffered from untreated depression. However, the jury found her guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 18. Brooke, the only survivor of the trio's friendship, was left traumatized. She later told reporters that she replayed the night over and over, wondering if she could have stopped it. She became a vocal advocate for anti-bullying initiatives, speaking in schools about emotional abuse and the hidden dangers of toxic relationships. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. Three best friends who once shared everything, secrets, laughter, dreams, were now bound forever by a moment of irreversible violence. Parents, teachers, and students struggled to make sense of how ordinary teenage conflict had spiraled into murder. Years later, Natalie expressed remorse from prison. In a letter read publicly during a victim impact event, she wrote, "I thought I was powerless. But in trying to take back control, I destroyed everything and everyone I ever loved." The story of Sarah, Brooke, and Natalie became a lasting warning that unspoken pain, when left to fester, can rot even the closest bonds. What begins as friendship can curdle into bitterness and rage, and when trust turns to fear, tragedy isn't far behind. For more real-life crime stories, subscribe and stay tuned for the next deep dive.